Hello, welcome again to Bert's Books, where this evening, Saturday night under lockdown, with setting a bad example by drinking a beer right here in front of you, I am going to be doing a response video to the horror books tag, which was put out by another YouTuber, Hey Little Thrifter, whose channel, I'll stick a link down there, but go and have a look. So the first question was, how and when did you first get into horror? That's really difficult to answer. I couldn't really pinpoint any sort of specific moment. I think it was probably just so embedded in the diet of children's fiction I had. I remember having we had an illustrated copy of Hansel and Gretel, and of course you get this terrifying witch in that. I mean, I would have been sort of 3 when I read that, and then we also had a copy of an illustrated copy of Baba Yaga, I think, which again another horrifying witch kind of figure in this. And then we were given Straw Peter. I would have been 4 or something, and reading what was the author's name? Heinrich Hoffmann. Straw Peter, which features all kinds of nasty shit. It's a horrible thing, you know. There's one of the, I mean, I guess they're not, they're poems rather than stories almost, but there's one where a kid has his thumbs sliced off by a man with a big pair of shears, and there's this illustration of blood squirting around this place, and this book was routinely given to 4-year-olds. So you're on a diet of that sort of thing, and then once you're of an age, you start seeing films. I think the first film I saw possibly was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I mean, not a horror film in itself, but you have that child catcher. It was the most horrific figure in the public imagination. And then they showed us The Wizard of Oz at school, like a Christmas treat or something, again at a pretty young age. So, I guess horror got in under the guise of just general children's entertainment. What was the first horror book that you read? I don't know, can anyone answer that question accurately? I think it would have been more anthologies. I think in the school library there would have been a number of spooky anthologies, which you're at that age, your first reaction to horror, of course, you're doing that, but there's some part of you, some perverse part of you that's kind of going. I think that would have influenced choices of reading when let loose in the school or in a local children's section of the library. I don't know, I can't pinpoint any specifics. I think it probably was a Puffin anthology, a spooky Puffin anthology. Puffin was like this junior imprint. But we also had the school library had these old illustrated volumes, like compendiums of children's ghost stories or horror stories. I can't remember, but there was an illustration. There was this, done in that slightly Victorianish line drawing style. There's this headless skeleton, and it's trying to wrench the skull out of the hands of this. There's this little girl in a nightdress, kind of trying to hold on to this skull, and this animated skeleton is trying to pull it from her hands, and it was terrifying. I wish I knew. If anyone knows what that story was, comments below. But there's one that I know at a young age. I think it was a Puffin anthology called Ghosts, Spooks and Spectres, and the cover art in itself, I mean, before you even opened it up and read any of the stories, I'll try and find a scan and put it up. The cover art I just found absolutely terrifying. These spectral kind of wraiths gliding across this churchyard, this misty churchyard. What horror related goodness can we expect from my channel? Well, I don't exclusively do horror. It's more mass market paperbacks, pulp. I think I'll veer from just absolute trashy pulp, which it's quite fun to, make cruel fun of in a way, but all in sort of generous spirit. But I think I'll veer from that to kind of misunderstood or underappreciated, great, an underrated horror author. I do think Basil Copper's name should be more widely known. Largely short stories, but I, as a kid, picked up an anthology of his called Not After Nightfall, and there's stories that come from a realm of the imagination. It's not gratuitous, run-of-the-mill type horror stuff. Overrated. Ooh, that's fighting talk, isn't it? I'm not gonna get myself into trouble here. I kind of haven't really had that much of a good time with James Herbert's writing. He had his audience and knew how to pitch to it, but I failed to find anything terribly... Oh, maybe I shouldn't go on. Three favourite horror books. Well, you might argue that not all of these belong in the genre strictly, but they kind of work for me on the horror level. Firstly, Emile Zola's... Take that so you can see it. Emile Zola's Thérèse Raquin, which is a very disturbing story with arguably you could read it as a supernatural subtext. I think it's meant to be more the psychological mayhem that's going on in the protagonist's minds. It was also dramatised by the Beeb in the early 80s, which again was fair. I mean, it was shocking when it came out. I think it was quite a controversial book when it came out, but even a 1980s TV adaptation was, I remember sort of going, whoa. So, secondly, William Golding's Lord of the Flies, again, maybe strictly not something you'd place in the horror section, but nevertheless, I picked it up again at quite a young age. We'd somehow been shown at school an extract of the, there's a sort of black and white film adaptation of it, and that seemed quite powerful to me, so I picked up the book off my parents' shelf, and very unsettling. The kind of implications of how it goes and how paper thin civilization can be, and when the trappings of that fall away, just how easily we revert to it's that heart of darkness kind of thing, I suppose. Okay, number 3. You want a foil stamped horror book. That's the definition for me. If it's got foil stamping on the cover. Andrew Neiderman's Pin, which is one I picked it up I suppose I was kind of 15 or something when I first picked this up, just purely on the strength of the cover illustration, the kind of anatomical dummy with the couple who happen to be brother and sister behind it. I've actually done an episode now on this book. It's one that I just have found myself going back to a number of times over the years. It's quite a haunting work. Question 8. Recommend a book for someone who is new to the horror genre. Again, I'd say start with some anthologies. Go dig out some old, like the Pan Book of Horror Stories, those Pan Book of Horror Stories, those type of things, and just dive in, and you'll find what works for you and what authors you think you might want to know more about. I mean, those are quite a good gateway drug. Book to film adaptations you either loved or hated. Well, Salem's Lot always comes to mind. I did revisit the book quite recently and felt the film actually did a good job. It maybe needed a little bit of paring down, and the film or TV adaptation, if we're going to be pedantic about it, is strictly not a film but a 2-part TV adaptation. But Salem's Lot, I think, very effectively condensed that novel to its, you know, its best form. I think I do prefer. Sorry, I'm probably going to get pilloried for this, but I do prefer the film to the book with that one. And I do remember the impact on the, you know, I don't know if it was his first UK screening, but certainly the first time I saw it on TV. And of course, it was shown late at night. The impact of it on me at that age was, you know, it was a fairly worrying film. It continues to be. So how do you discover new or new to you horror books? Well, I think even in this age of internet recommendations and Goodreads and all the rest of it, I'd still find the way I prefer is just to be in a dusty old second-hand place, rummaging through the shelves, and just, you know, something grabs your attention that maybe just the cover looks interesting, or has got a interesting title, or you just kind of get to know the look of these things. They have a sort of aesthetic. You just kind of know after a time what might be an interesting second-hand book. It tends to be little coastal towns. Coastal towns seem to be good for second-hand books for some reason. 11. What was the last horror book that you bought? Well, it took a bit of seeking out, but it was this, John Christopher's The Little People, which has a bit of a problematic reputation. It's one, you know, unusually I did pick this up as an internet recommendation rather than randomly stumble over it. There's kind of so much written about it and this reputation it's got. I didn't think it was. It's not the car crash that you might think it would be. It's probably not John Christopher. It's probably not the best place to start with him. But I may do an episode on this one, actually. It's an interesting one. So, yeah, maybe more to follow on that one. What horror book is on the top of your list to buy? I Need to See More by Dennis Etchison. I did an episode on his novelisation of Halloween 3, and I do feel I need to read more by him. I know he novelised the film of The Fog, so that's completely separate from James Herbert's The Fog, and also Videodrome, I believe. But then, you know, there's other titles too. So I do feel. I think he also novelised Halloween 2. So yes, no particular specific novel, but something by Dennis Etchison.